text message came in at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was still in my housecoat, standing at the kitchen counter waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, and I reached for my phone out of habit. My husband had been away for 4 days, a work trip to Calgary, he'd said, and I hadn't heard much from him. A few one-word replies to my messages. Fine, busy, later. So when I saw his name light up the screen, I felt something warm in my chest. Relief, maybe. I thought he was checking in. I read the message 3 times before my brain would accept what my eyes were seeing. Linda, I need you to hear this from me directly. Uncle Pete passed away last week and left me everything. We're talking about close to $2 million. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I want a divorce. Please start looking for somewhere else to stay. The house is in my name, and I think it's better if you make other arrangements. I'm sorry. Neil. I stood there in my kitchen. The coffee maker beeped. Steam rose from the pot. Outside the window, the neighbor across the street was scraping frost off his windshield, the kind of ordinary Tuesday morning thing you see 1,000 times and never notice. I noticed it that morning. I stared at him for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter, poured my coffee, and sat down at the table. I didn't cry, not right away. I think I was too stunned to cry. We had been married for 38 years. 38 years. My youngest was born the same year we bought this house. He was now 34. Our daughter had gotten married in our backyard, right out there where the cedar hedge needed trimming and the bird feeder needed filling, and all the ordinary ongoing business of a life we had built together still needed attending to. And Neil had sent me a text message. Not a phone call. A text. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think it matters. Our marriage had not been perfect. I don't think any marriage that lasts 3 decades is perfect. There had been difficult years. Years when we barely spoke. Years when the distance between us felt less like space and more like a decision. I had noticed, in the past year or so, that Neil seemed different. Lighter in some way that had nothing to do with me. He was going to the gym. He was buying new clothes. He had started listening to music in the car with the windows down, which he hadn't done since we were in our 30s. I had told myself I was imagining things, or that it was a good sign, that he was happy. I suppose he was. I set the coffee mug down and picked up the phone again. I read the message a 4th time. Uncle Pete passed away last week. Neil had an uncle named Peter Callahan, his mother's brother, a bachelor who had lived alone in a farmhouse outside of Lethbridge for as long as I could remember. We had visited him exactly twice in 38 years. I had sent Christmas cards every year. He had never sent one back. Neil would call him occasionally, usually on his birthday, and the conversations lasted about 10 minutes. I had not known they were close. I had not known there was a will or that Neil was in it. $2 million. I thought about all the times I had worried about money, the years when Neil was between contracts and I stretched every grocery run to last 2 weeks instead of 1. The winter our furnace died and we argued for 3 days about whether we could afford to replace it. The year I went back to work part-time, then full-time, then gave up my job at the school board entirely to be home when the kids needed someone there because we had decided together that was what the family needed. I'd step back so Neil could step forward. He was an estimator for a large construction firm. It was a good career, but it needed his full attention, and I had given him that. I had given him 38 years of that. And now he was in Calgary with $2 million and a lawyer on retainer, and he wanted me to find somewhere else to stay. I called my daughter. I don't know why that was my first instinct. Maybe because she had always been the steadier one, the one who thought before she spoke. She answered on the second ring, which told me she was already awake and probably already at her kitchen table with her own coffee, the way she always is in the mornings. Mom, is everything okay? I need to tell you something, I said, and I need you to let me get through it before you react. She listened. She did let me get through it, mostly. I heard a sharp intake of breath when I got to the part about the text message, and again when I mentioned the $2 million, but she didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Mom," she said, "he sent you a text." "I know. 38 years and he sent you a text." "I know, sweetheart." "Where is he right now?" "Calgary. Or he says Calgary." Another pause. "Do you want me to come over?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to have someone sitting across from me at this kitchen table so the silence in the house would have somewhere to go. But I also knew that if my daughter came over, we would both get angry together, and that was not what I needed right now. What I needed was to think. "Not yet," I said. "I'm going to make some calls first." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that cost money," I said. "I'll call you this afternoon." After I hung up, I sat for a while longer. I thought about what I actually knew and what I didn't. I thought about what I had and what I might not have. The house. Neil had said the house was in his name, but was it? I had a vague memory of signing papers years ago, refinancing, something. I couldn't be certain. The car in the driveway was in both our names. We had a joint checking account and a joint savings account, and I had my own small RSP from the years I had worked. I had my CPP coming eventually, though I wasn't old enough to collect yet. What else? What had I actually accumulated in 38 years? I made a list on the back of an envelope. It was shorter than I wanted it to be. Then I opened my laptop and I started looking for a family lawyer. I want to tell you honestly that I did not feel brave during this time. People sometimes say when they hear stories like mine that the woman must have been so strong, so composed, so determined. I was not any of those things. I was frightened. I was humiliated in a way that is hard to describe. The particular humiliation of being discarded at 63 years old, of realizing that the person who was supposed to know you best had reduced you to a logistical problem to be solved via text message. I cried in the car on the way to my first appointment with the lawyer. I had to sit in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I could go in. The lawyer's name was Catherine Okoro. She was a woman in her mid-50s. With reading glasses, she kept pushing up her nose in a manner that was direct without being unkind. Her office was small and tidy, on the second floor of a building in our part of town, and she poured me a glass of water before I'd even sat down. I told her everything. I showed her the text message. She read it, then set my phone down on the desk between us without comment. "How long ago did you say you purchased the house?" she asked. I told her, 29 years ago or thereabouts. "And you said you refinanced?" "Once, maybe twice, I'm not sure. We did it together. I remember signing papers." She made a note. "We'll pull the title, but if your name is on the title, his message about the house being in his name means nothing. He can't ask you to leave your own property. And even if your name isn't on the title, as a married spouse in this province, you have significant rights. He can't simply remove you." I hadn't known that. I had read his message and believed him. I had started in the back of my mind, already calculating whether my daughter had a spare room, whether there were apartments I could afford. "What about the inheritance?" I asked. "He seems to think that's entirely his." Catherine pushed her glasses up. In Canada, inherited money is generally considered separate property, meaning it isn't automatically split in a divorce. "However," she said, and I noticed she paused just slightly before continuing, "that rule comes with important exceptions. If the inheritance was commingled, mixed with marital assets, it can lose that protected status. If it was used to pay down the family home, for instance, or deposited into a joint account, it becomes very difficult to trace and very difficult to protect." "Has he received the money yet?" "The message said his uncle passed away last week. Probate in Alberta typically takes several months at minimum. He likely hasn't received a cent yet." Something shifted in my chest, a very small thing, but I felt it. "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means," Catherine said, "that we have time." She explained the process to me carefully. We would file for divorce. We would request full financial disclosure from Neil, every account, every asset, everything that had accumulated during the marriage. 38 years of shared financial life was not easily untangled. My contributions to the household, the years I had worked, the years I had not, but had made it possible for Neil to advance in his career, the value of the labor I had provided as the primary homemaker and parent, all of that was relevant. Canadian family law, she told me, was built on the principle that marriage is an economic partnership. What is built during the marriage is shared. My name didn't need to be on the paycheck for my contribution to count. He earns a good salary, I said. We have savings. RSPs, the house. Will account for all of it, she said. I drove home feeling, for the first time, something other than fear. It wasn't confidence exactly. It was more like the sense of standing on solid ground after a long time feeling like the floor was tilting beneath me. Neil came back from Calgary 2 days later. He texted again to say he'd be home to collect some things and that he hoped we could keep this civil. I texted back one word: fine. I was in the living room when he came in. He looked, and this is the thing I keep coming back to, he looked good, rested. He had a new jacket on, one I'd never seen before. He was surprised to find me sitting there calmly, I think. He probably expected tears or anger or some version of the conversation he'd already scripted in his head. Linda, he said, I'm glad you're... I've retained a lawyer, I said. Her name is Catherine Okoro. You'll be hearing from her office. I'd suggest you retain your own counsel before you do anything with the estate. He stood in the doorway for a moment. I want this to be straightforward, he said. I don't want this to get complicated. Then you shouldn't have sent a text message, I said. He started to say something else. I picked up my book and started reading. He took some clothes and left. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be clear about that because I don't think these stories should pretend that once you find a good lawyer, everything becomes simple. My son called from Vancouver and was furious on my behalf, which was touching and also exhausting because I had to talk him down several times from driving back to have a conversation with his father that I was quite sure would not go well. My daughter came over most weekends and we would sit in the kitchen and go through things together. Papers, documents, old bank records. We found the title to the house. My name was on it. Neil had been wrong, or he had hoped I wouldn't check. That was the first thing. The second thing took a little longer to untangle. When Neil had come back from Calgary, the real reason for the trip, it turned out, was not work at all, but a meeting with the executor of his uncle's estate. He had done something that I suspect he thought was clever. He had transferred a portion of his personal savings, about $40,000, into a new account opened in his name alone. He had done this, I think, to begin establishing what was his and what was mine before the divorce was formalized. What he had not counted on was that I had been managing our household finances for most of our marriage. I knew every account. I knew the balances. I knew when money moved because I had always been the one watching it. I brought the bank statements to Catherine. She looked at them for a long time. Then she looked at me. Did he tell you he was moving this money? She asked. No, I said. And this transfer happened after he sent you the text? 3 days after. She nodded slowly. This is what we call dissipation of marital assets. Transferring or hiding money to keep it from being divided in a divorce. The courts take a dim view of it. She paused. This may actually help your case considerably. I hadn't gone looking for evidence. I had just done what I had always done, kept track, paid attention, noticed things. It turned out that those 38 years of domestic attentiveness, all those things I had done so quietly that no one thought to thank me for them, had given me a very clear picture of our financial life. Clearer, it seemed, than Neil had counted on. The mediation took several months. Neil did eventually receive the inheritance. Uncle Pete's estate was settled in autumn, just under 18 months after that Tuesday morning text message. By then, we were deep into the division process. The inheritance itself was largely protected, as Catherine had explained it would be, because Neil had kept it in a separate account and had not mingled it with marital funds. I had not expected that money, and I did not fight for it. What I did fight for was everything else. The house. My name was on the title, and I had contributed to every mortgage payment, either directly from my own earnings or indirectly through the years I had maintained the household so Neil's full salary could go toward family expenses. I was awarded the house. Our joint savings split equally, as they should have been. The transferred $40,000. The court factored Neil's attempt to move those funds into the division. What he had tried to take quietly, I received in the settlement. Not as punishment, Catherine explained, but as equalization. The law doesn't like it when one spouse tries to get a head start. My spousal support. This one surprised me most. Because I'd stepped back from my own career to support Neil's, and because of the disparity between what he would be earning in retirement and what I would be receiving, I was entitled to spousal support for a defined period. It was not a fortune, but it was recognition. A formal, legal acknowledgement that what I had done had mattered, had had value, had contributed to the life we built, even though my name had never been on the company letterhead. I called my daughter the evening after the settlement was finalized. We didn't talk about the money, not really. She asked me how I felt. I thought about it for a while before I answered. How did I feel? Tired, certainly. Older than I had felt at the beginning of all this, but also, and this is harder to explain, more solid, more like myself, as though I had been waiting for years to find out what I was made of, and now I knew. I feel like I can breathe, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You know what I keep thinking about? What? He sent you a text. I laughed. It surprised me. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere you'd forgotten about. He did, I said. He absolutely did. And now what? A store in my kitchen. My kitchen. The table where I'd sat that first morning with my coffee going cold, and a list of everything I owned written on the back of an envelope. The window with the cedar hedge outside, and the bird feeder that I had refilled last week, and the ordinary, continuing, entirely mine business of a life. Now, I said, I think I'm going to book a trip. I've always wanted to see Nova Scotia in October. My daughter laughed too. I'll come with you, she said. And she did. I still have that envelope, the one I wrote the list on, that first morning when I was trying to figure out what I had and what I didn't. It's in the kitchen drawer now, under some takeout menus and a dead pen. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it reminds me of how small I felt sitting at that table and how different things look from where I'm standing now. What I've come to understand, looking back at all of it, is that the life you build matters. Every choice has a consequence. Not in some abstract sense, but in the most ordinary, practical, real way. Neil made choices. He chose to send a text message instead of having a conversation. He chose to quietly move money before the papers were even filed. He chose to assume that because he had held the financial reins, I hadn't been paying attention. Each of those choices had a consequence he hadn't thought through, and the choices I had made, 38 years of keeping track, of knowing every account and every balance, of paying attention even when no one was watching. Those had consequences too, just not the ones either of us expected. I think about Catherine Okoro sometimes. The way she pushed her glasses up and said very matter-of-factly, "We have time." She didn't dress it up. She didn't make promises. She just laid out what the law said and let me decide what to do with that information. What I needed in that moment wasn't someone to feel sorry for me. I needed someone to help me think clearly, and I was capable of that. I hadn't known I was, not fully, until I had to be. That's the thing no one tells you about going through something like this at 63. You find out what you're actually made of. I'd spent so many years being the person who kept things running quietly in the background, the one who made sure the fridge was full and the bills were paid and the children had what they needed, and somewhere along the way, I had started to believe that was all I was. A background person, someone whose contributions didn't quite count unless someone else acknowledged them. The settlement said otherwise. The law said otherwise. 38 years of quiet, consistent, unglamorous work had value. It was right there in the paperwork. I'm not telling this story to make anyone angry or to say anything general about men or marriage or money. I'm telling it because I think there are women sitting at kitchen tables right now who feel the way I felt that morning. Frightened, humiliated, convinced they have nothing to stand on. And I want them to know that the steadiness they've shown, the attention they've paid, the intelligence they've applied to holding a household and a family together for decades, that counts. It is counted. Even when the person who benefited from it most never thought to say thank you. Do the right thing, quietly and consistently for long enough, and you build something. Even when you don't realize you're building it, even when no one is watching, the foundation is there. And when the moment comes when you actually need it, you'll be surprised how solid it is. Nova Scotia in October is beautiful, by the way. The maples were every shade of orange you can imagine. My daughter and I drove the Cabot Trail and stopped at a little place in Bedeque for chowder and didn't talk about any of it for 3 whole days. That was its own kind of justice.